everybody.
I'm here too to give in my input and chime in whenever I have something to say, so there you go.
I was thinking about something about Doom, because people always say that Doom isn't a horror game, and that's why they'll say like Doom 3 is a bad game. But I mean, really, all the Doom games are horror games, really, now that I think about it. Like, what... I mean, it's stupid to think that just by changing the lighting and giving, like, a flashlight, or, like, these are just, like, small, minor game mechanics and improvements. But if by giving the game these things automatically makes it a horror game, maybe it's just a horror game in this...
I remember when I was a kid, I thought all of the Doom games were horror games, and while I think an argument can be made that they are definitely horror in a way, I don't think the primary goal of Doom 1 and 2 was to be horror. It definitely feels a lot more action-based, which we'll get into a little more as we go with the changes you mentioned. I don't just think the lighting and the music were changed. I mean, you were also made weaker, movement was made slower. However, I do agree with you later on when you talk more about the gameplay, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But I don't think that horror was the main goal with Doom 1 and 2, although I do definitely think it was present and intended, especially when you look at Doom 1 on the PS1, where literally all they did change was the lighting and the music, which, again, made it a horror game. So you've definitely got a point that there is absolutely horror there, straight from the very beginning, if just by changing the music it changes it that much.
Situation the main character is in is clearly horrifying. You're surrounded by demons trying to kill you. It's a horror game. They're monsters that turn into whatever are they called, Jibs or Gibbs or whatever? I don't freaking know.
First off, I think both Jibs and Gibbs are fine. I'll use either one. I kind of use them interchangeably. But second off, the situation is scary to think about, except for in the last two Bethesda games. Because they make you really, really fucking powerful in the last two Bethesda games. 2016 and Eternal, I don't know if you can really make an argument that those are horror. You can say they have horror themes and elements, but the Bethesda ones, I don't really think you can make that argument, because the pacing and the fucking... It's very clearly not going to make you scared. Because, again, the demons are trapped in there with you, right? Especially in Eternal. Although Eternal is harder, so that is still scary and tense, so I don't know, maybe.
But where they turn into pounds of flesh, but like the scenery is clearly horror. The game's clearly horror. If just by changing the lighting and the music, it's all a horror game now. I mean, it's kind of stupid to say it's not just because it has like a cool metal-like soundtrack. That doesn't make it automatically not a horror game. I mean, is metal in itself is sort of a lot of metal music that even inspired Doom, I would say, is almost like horror music, like it's horror themed, right? Like, think about like a lot of songs even by Metallica or Slipknot or anything, or any Korn or anything like that. Like, there's definitely horror elements in that music.
You also get like metal musicians going on to make horror movies, right? Like Rob Zombie.
I think so. I think it's clearly, it has to be considered a horror game. I don't see any reason not to consider it a horror game. It's action horror, definitely. Like, it's definitely an action horror game, but it's still horror. And even in Doom 3, like, yeah, it's different, but not that different. It mostly does just make the game look more realistic.
Well, yeah, something I think people undersell is that Doom 3's, like, third act, like, the last... And even then, even before that, like, the later you get in the game, it just starts to play like Doom. Like, it starts out very horror and immerses you in the story and stuff like that. But once you have all the weapons, it's still fast-paced, action-packed, and there's tons of demons. Like, It just starts out with more of a story. The further you go into it, the more it plays like old school Doom.
I think because it's just, adding lighting and, simple game mechanics. Like, yeah, the demons don't look the same. And, but it actually keeps close to the source material in a lot of ways that Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal don't. Like, Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal have a few things that, like, they add a lot of things that are good for Doom, I think. And I think for new games, it makes sense that they add this stuff. But I'm just saying, like, if you're saying which is more like classic Doom, Doom 3 or Doom Eternal, I think actually Doom 3.
I would say in the most direct sense, like when you're talking about gameplay due to mechanics and stuff, you're kind of right. However, I would say tonally and atmospherically, no. I think 2016 and Eternal absolutely feel more like a natural evolution of Doom 1 and 2, whereas Doom 3, the gameplay is very similar in that, the movement and the shooting. I mean, there's jumping and stuff, which wasn't in it before. Although I would say 2016, the movement and stuff is actually still pretty similar. So I don't know. Like, Eternal, in the sense that it has more mechanics, is less like it. But I would argue that it makes much more sense as a successor. Though I love Doom 3, and Doom 3 is the one that I tell people to start with, I think Doom Eternal and Doom 2016, tonally, atmospherically, and in the spirit of it, are more like the older games. But again, if you're talking directly in the most literal, actual gameplay sense, then sure, Doom 3.
Like, I think Doom 3 plays like standard Doom. I think it's, just pretty basic Doom game with different kind of lighting and better graphics. And it has a story too. All the Doom games have a story, that whole thing. A lot of things people say about Doom are just not true. Like, they say it doesn't really have a story when it clearly has lots of story. All the Doom games clearly have a story.
Yeah, but Doom 1's story was a lot more comedic, as was Doom 2's. I mean, you had the shit about Daisy the rabbit being the whole reason Doom guy's so angry. Like, his fucking rabbit was killed by demons, and there's, like, a whole big thing about that. It's very tongue-in-cheek and sarcastic with its story in Doom 1 and 2, so I don't really know that it's as good of a horror story. Like, it's much more fucking, like, satirical in a way. Like, because you gotta remember, Doom was originally supposed to be, like, an adaptation of Aliens, which, is an action movie. Then they lost the license to that and changed it all to demons and stuff, which obviously was for the better. But since it was a game in the 90s, there's a lot of humor in it. Like, in a similar vein to Duke Nukem. Not as much as Duke Nukem, but it's still there.
And they're all clearly horror, and people are like, oh, it's actually cool because it's like this, and because it's like this, and it's like, no, it's just cool because it's cool, dude. It's demons, and you're killing them. It's cool. There's metal music. It's pretty cool.
So yeah, I'll wrap up with a little bit of conclusion thoughts myself. Doom 3 was not actually the first, horror game in the Doom series. I think there were always meant to be horror elements. I don't think they were always horror games. That is one thing I do disagree on. I think action horror, maybe, but even then, it's definitely more action. Like I said, it's got humor, it's comedic, it's tongue-in-cheek with Doom 1 and 2. But I can see why horror was the natural progression. That said, Doom 64 was already a horror game. And again, it changed very little. It changed the lighting and the music and the atmosphere. Doom 1 on the PS1, same thing. All they changed was the lighting and the music. So, I think that you have a point that there's always been the horror bit there. But I do think that changing the atmosphere does go a long way. There's plenty of, movie trailers you see where they'll edit, a Happy Kids movie to be a horror movie, or vice versa. So, the slightest edits can make a huge difference. I do agree with you that the horror aspect was always there. I don't agree that it was always, the main goal. Maybe you didn't say it was always the main goal, but to act like the series has always been like a horror game in the same way as it was in Doom 3, I don't really agree. I can see that it was always there, and I can see Doom 3 being a natural progression of that. And again, Doom 3 was my introduction, and Doom 3 is my third favorite Doom game, you know, following Eternal in 2016. So I do like Doom 3 more than Doom 1 and 2, which, you know, is a hot take in some regards, obviously, because a lot of people don't like Doom 3 because they're stupid. But obviously the horror was always there to some extent. Doom 3 was just much more overt and in your face with it. Doom 3 decided to actually give it a plot and substance, which Doom 1 and 2 had, yes, but they had it to a much less degree, and again, it was much more tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say.
I'm not good at ending videos. Goodbye.
Someone by the name of Rabid Waffles, who I actually know about because I did a video responding to one of their videos 2 years back, which we will explain later. They comment, Valerie Flowers is the best YouTuber. I'm his biggest fan. He really entertains me with his videos. What a guy.
Hilarious and original. Hilarious and original.